Hi, Em.
Hi, Rick.
How was your week?
So far, it's been pretty good.
Good.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
My week has been pretty good too.
Awesome.
Yeah, I took a trip with Nick and his family last weekend.
Mm-hmm.
It was really cute. We had a good time.
I love that. That's super fun.
Yeah,
And
it
you got
was.
a beautiful new sweatshirt.
I did, thanks to Mama Clark. You can't even see the little birdie because of my thing. There's a little bird here. But yeah, it's comfy as all get out, dude.
Yeah,
I
all
literally,
soft.
it is. I put it on. I'm going to tattle on myself a little bit. I usually wash like everything religiously after I get it from a store. But it was so cute and so comfortable. I put it on immediately as soon as we got home, and then I slept in the damn thing, and then I slept in it for 2 more nights. And yeah, it's now my lucky sweatshirt.
Nice.
I think
love
I might
that.
just wear it for the rest of my life.
Do it.
We'll see.
It. Looks great on you.
I feel like usually white, like the lighter colors, especially like pale yellow, are usually like yeller. Oh my god. I'm from Texas, in case you didn't know. Sometimes it comes out. How is embarrassing. But I feel like sometimes these colors will wash me out. But this one doesn't. I don't feel like.
I think it looks
I
good.
like it.
It's like that perfect, like, not too pale, but like not super
Yeah.
bright.
Yeah, because thankfully I have pink undertones. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of balances itself.
Yeah.
Even if it didn't, I think I would wear it forever. It's so comfortable.
Fair.
Who gives a shit if I look good? I'm not here to impress. I'm here to be comfortable. Life is an experience.
Yes. Yes. Faux show.
Faux show. Hey there, all you sibling type people, and welcome back to Sister Show Me How. I'm Riccatoni, your how-to sister and host of Sister Show Me How.
And I'm Empanada, co-host of Sister Show Me How and your other how-to sister.
You know, I feel like nowadays everyone is on their healing journey, and I kind of love that. I really do. But I feel like when everyone's doing the same thing all at the same time, some of the like key important parts kind of get muddied around.
Yeah, especially when it's something that maybe needs some specific training or education.
Right.
But it's become so commonplace to talk about. It's like a gigantic game of telephone.
Right. And on top of the fact that like everything now is in like 30-second clips. Mm-hmm. And so it's like if you can't, oftentimes those things get pulled out of context. And so it makes it really easy for black and white to become gray. And I think that therapy speak, quote unquote, has become a big portion of evidence for that, because a lot of the times we've seen that people will take these trigger therapy words and manipulate them and use them to be able to control other people or situations.
We've seen that with a few celebrities that think that it's cool to manipulate their partners. You know who you are.
Wink, wink. We're not throwing any shade until we are.
We would never.
So today we're going to take a little dive into correcting some of these and talk about boundaries.
What are they? When do we apply them? And how do we keep them?
Let's talk
about it.
This topic, I feel like, has come up a lot for me this week. Well, actually a lot for me this year and the past 2 years. Really, ever since I feel like quitting architecture was kind of like a matrix point for me.
Right.
Like from that moment, I split off into a completely different person. Like there is some other dimension in which Rick did not decide that leaving architecture was worth it.
Right.
And she's still doing that. But we jumped off into like a splitting point into a whole other dimension. And now I am doing this. And I feel like ever since that one point, boundaries has been like a big thing for me. It's like, okay, so you've decided you're going to redefine yourself. Well, that comes with all of these things. And all of these areas I've had to like reshift and protect.
Right. I think a lot of that is also potentially because you had a decent number of people telling you that you were insane and that you were going to ruin your life.
It's not the first time in my life.
I mean, probably won't be the last. But
No.
yeah, I think you just, you had to go through that time to really figure out, like, no, I'm going to hold steady in these boundaries, and like, these are my boundaries, and you're not going to tell me that I can't have them, or
Right.
that you can't walk all over them.
Yep. Yeah, so it's just been very interesting to, one, figure out what my boundaries are, two, figure out how the fuck to uphold them, and then three, figure out how to communicate them.
Right. Yeah.
So super easy tasks.
Totally.
Absolutely manageable. Kindergarten bullshit. That is total sarcasm. Just in case you didn't catch that, I am being 100% sarcastic. But I actually ran into a friend from college this week, and he was telling me that he's been listening to the pod, which I love so much.
We love that.
We love your support. If you're out there listening to us, we appreciate the fuck out of you.
That goes for all of you guys listening too. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, thank you
Everybody.
for supporting us.
Yeah. We're just up here on our soapbox, and we like that you're listening to it. It makes us feel important. But no, really, so he said that he's been listening to the pod and that he's really enjoyed it, but also that he has had a lot of the same issues that we have had and have expressed on the pod thus far. And
Well, I'm glad it's not just us.
I know, me too. It's so lonely thinking that you're the only one suffering in the world.
Yeah.
And then so enlightening to realize, hey, guess what? We're all fucking suffering.
And oftentimes in the same ways. Like,
Yeah. Or very similar ways.
yeah.
Yeah. It may be, like, what was the point I was trying to make? It may be two different hues of the same color, but, it's still
Same
mostly the
situation, different font.
Exactly. That's a better way of putting that. Yes. Yeah, same situation, different font. Wow, that's a good one. I like that.
I've heard that a lot with, like, celebrity, like, doppelgangers, or like maybe not quite fully to a doppelganger, where people are like, oh, same person, different font.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah.
Can't take credit for it, unfortunately.
Well, whatever. Who can take credit for anything nowadays? The internet. Everyone's just manipulating a thought they've already seen.
Yeah.
We're not imaginative creatures. We don't.
That reminds me so much of this TikTok drama, but it's so completely off point.
Let's not.
We're not going to make Rick cut out 8 million hours of me talking about some random TikTok bullshit, so we're just going to skip right over that.
God, I love you so much. I appreciate you. So whenever I ran into this friend, he talked to that the most thing that he had come up with lately was boundaries with his family. And then you had talked, whenever we talked last week, had expressed that boundaries were coming up within your family and your family experiences too.
Yeah.
So I just felt like it was really important to go ahead and talk about boundaries, because everyone seems to be figuring out now that, one, they need them, and two, they don't know what they should be or how they should communicate them.
Right, yeah.
So I did, of course, do my little Rick thing, and I went ahead and figured out the definition for a boundary, and of course, Webster gave me the literal sense of a boundary, which is a line that marks the limits of an area. But I think genuinely that can be applied to the metaphysical, theoretical, personal, emotional sense too, because
yeah, it really is like, this is my line, and if you cross it, like, you're crossing my boundary.
Essentially, this is the line of my safe zone.
Yeah.
And this is how far I extend myself. And this is how far you are allowed to extend into my safe zone. That's essentially what boundaries look like in a metaphysical sense, quote unquote.
Metaphorical.
Well, I don't know.
Both? We have the internet.
Here we go again.
Just my anagram is still up from last
Oh,
time.
wow.
So metaphysical, the definition is of or pertaining to metaphysics, which is an idea, doctrine, or posited reality outside of human sense of perception. And then a metaphor is something that's figurative or symbolic.
Okay, so I guess it would be a metaphor.
Metaphorically, yeah.
I just don't like the way that sounds because it makes it seem like it's not real, but it is very real. Do you know what I mean?
I get it, but I also think that metaphorically, like, we talk about it like, I mean, I can also see it being metaphysically because then it is kind of like this idea of like, it's not a physical perception, you know?
Yeah. Because you're right, it's not a physical perception, but I mean, whatever. It's just me getting caught up on the logistics of it again.
I mean, it's
Go
like
figure.
me last time with apology or forgiveness.
Forgiveness, yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
We think too hard.
Sometimes. Isn't it? She gave me a sticker. It says high on life, and I just put it on my water bottle.
It's so cute.
It's very cute. And I am indeed high on life. You know, someone asked me today, they were like, what do you expect to get out of this pod? And I was like, you know what, honey, I've already gotten it. This is what I expect to get out of this pod, I'll tell you. One, I expect to expand on the quality of conversations I'm having with my peers.
Yeah.
Check. Even if it's just you and I, that's fine. But it hasn't been you and I. I have had brilliant conversations with my auntie, with my mother, with friends that I haven't talked to in 15 years.
Right.
Some kid, which he's not a kid anymore, excuse me, he just was a kid when I knew him. Some man that I knew from 4th grade called me today, telling me that he listened to our first one. He's like, I'm about to listen to the second one. I was like, you go, bro, I love that.
Cute.
And then the guy that I ran into from college today,
Yeah.
or not today, last week
yeah.
in the store. So check. The next thing that I expect to happen from this is that I get to talk about the things that have been bothering me. Check. Mm-hmm. It helps me to reinforce my ideas and beliefs, and it helps when you disagree with me and vice versa, because then we get to work out the kinks of our beliefs and help solidify them even further.
Right.
And then the last thing that I expect to get out of this is to be able to share my progress with others.
Right.
And have them benefit from that. And
yeah.
again, check, because my relationship with my mother has already increased and it's only been up for a month. So, and that's just the bare minimum so far. Like,
Yeah.
again, we've only been up for a month. So I've already gotten everything I wanted from this, and anything that happens in the future is just a bonus, a brilliant, magnificent, beautiful, big fat bonus. Apple bottom bonus. Right in your face.
I feel like so many people think, because I've had similar questions. They're like, what's the point of this?
This is the point.
Yeah. And I'm like, I obviously never explained it as eloquently as you just did. But I'm always just like, nothing really. Like, I'm not going for fame or money or anything like that. To be honest, the idea of being famous scares the shit out of me.
I know.
Because I don't like being perceived when I go to the grocery store, let alone on any sort of large scale.
Grand scale.
So
people start recognizing
honestly,
you on the street.
like, yeah, fuck. If somebody like found like me out in the wild and they were like, oh, I listened to your podcast, I think I would shit my pants.
Right.
Like, just right there. And then they would probably never listen to the podcast again because they're like, why the fuck am I listening to this bitch talk?
She was so awkward. Why am I trusting her opinion on anything?
Yeah. Yeah, honestly.
That's how I would be too. Immediately, I would just like be starstruck and like just dumb.
Yeah, deer in the headlights.
Yeah,
fully.
absolutely. Like, you know me, you're watching this. Oh my God. Already, like our first podcast, I think at this moment only has like 70 already has like 70 views for the on it. And I'm just like, I don't even know 70 people. Who is watching this? Who are you? We love you, but who are you?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. But so yeah, I feel like genuinely we've already succeeded. Mm-hmm. We have already done the damn thing. I was proud of us day one.
Yeah.
I was just proud we did the damn thing and we're continuing to do it, and that just is it.
I really think that it's also like a helpful thing. Like, even if all we were doing is sitting here, like just chit-chatting about random shit, like gossiping, like anything like that, for me at least, having this like something else that I'm working towards is helpful.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
And so, I mean, obviously I wouldn't prefer to be sitting here talking like about random stuff and just gossiping, because like, what's the point?
Right. But okay, so I think getting back to what our actual topic is for today,
yeah,
I think that the metaphorical, quote unquote, definition of what a boundary is lines up pretty perfectly with what the physical definition of a boundary is.
Okay.
And so that's what I want to talk about today, is what is a boundary and what isn't a boundary. And as per usual, we're going to start with what isn't a boundary, because I feel like that's where we can register. I feel like when we look at our mistakes, like when we look through things, I feel like we register how to correct things when looking at our mistakes better than when we're just like looking at how to do it. You know what I mean? It's like, it's more beneficial for us to be like, oh, this is how I fucked it up, so I know how to course correct that way, rather than
that whole thing about learning from your mistakes or learning from somebody else's mistakes.
Right, absolutely.
Either or.
Because as we've already talked about in the past, the human condition is fucking things up. It just is how it is.
Yeah, that's who we are.
Yeah, trial by error. Trial by fire, however great, delightful little way you want to put that. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So a boundary is not a way to control another person.
No.
They're not intended to force other people to act, speak, dress, interact with you in any sort of way. Mm-mm. It is only 100% a way for you to protect your own spaces and experiences.
Right.
Has nothing to do with other people.
The only way that it really has to do with other people is that you are creating your boundaries based on how you will allow other people to treat you.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's not supposed to be something that you're holding over somebody's head saying, well, this is my boundary, so you're required to act this way. Or talk to me this way, or
Absolutely, because no one is required to uphold your boundaries.
No.
It is your responsibility to uphold your boundaries. Let me say that again. No one is required to uphold your boundaries. It is your responsibility to uphold your boundaries.
Absolutely.
Did you hear me? Your responsibility, not theirs.
Yeah.
We pick people in our lives who choose willingly to uphold our boundaries. We do not force people in our lives to uphold our boundaries because we said so.
Right.
That's not how life works.
And it might not even be so much that they're upholding our boundaries, but they're respectful of our boundaries.
You're correct. Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like that is a great way to put it. Because again, they're not enforcing the upheaval. Right. They're not enforcing the endorsement.
Yeah.
What am I trying to say here? They are not enforcing the boundary for you.
Right.
They are respecting that you have enforced that boundary. You're right.
Yeah, and they're not going, because they're respecting it, they're going to do everything in their power to not cross that boundary. And ideally, if they do cross it somehow, whether it's intentional or not, they're going to try and correct that behavior.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's the ideal scenario. And again, that's not something that you're forcing upon them. They're going to love you enough, hopefully, that they want to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another thing that is not a boundary are your feelings or getting your feelings hurt.
Right.
Because your feelings, again, are your responsibility. It's no one else's responsibility to walk around on eggshells around you just to make sure that they don't hurt your feelings. Your emotions and your triggers are your responsibility. It is up to you to A, recognize that you are having a feeling. It is up to you to B, then process and deal with that feeling. And then C, communicate that feeling if it needs to be communicated.
Right.
Actually, all feelings need to be communicated, whether that be in your own head, in a journal, or out loud to someone else. All
Right.
feelings need to be communicated. Right. They all need to have their space
Yeah.
to figure out why the fuck it's even there.
Yeah. And you can create a boundary based off of your feelings being hurt and like to protect your feelings.
Sure.
A boundary can certainly protect your feelings, but it's not the same as just being like, oh, you hurt my feelings, so like you crossed a boundary. That's not necessarily the same. It's like a square and a rectangle. Like the square, I don't remember the definition anymore because I've been out of...
All rectangles are squares, but not all squares are rectangles. No,
Or is
it's
it
backwards.
backwards?
It's backwards. All squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares.
Yeah. So it's like that, like somebody can hurt your feelings because they crossed a boundary, but they can also hurt your feelings without ever crossing a boundary. So they, yes, can go hand in hand, but that does not mean that they always go hand in hand.
Well, it's kind of like a situation of like, okay, say that you go to visit family. That seems to be the most typical one. You go to visit family and some uncle, granddad, auntie comments on your body. The boundary is not, I don't like when you comment on my body. The boundary is, if you continue to comment on my body, I will leave the situation.
Right.
Yes, we give a shit that it hurts your feelings. However, that does not elicit an action. It does not establish a line to not be crossed.
Right. Simply saying that your feelings were hurt doesn't establish a boundary.
No, it's an expression of your feelings.
Yes.
It is not a boundary.
Yeah.
Again, getting your feelings hurt and saying it hurts my feelings when, or whatever specific connotation of that you want to use, is an expression of your emotions. It is not laying down a boundary. They're separate.
Yeah.
Both, I would argue, are necessary. It is important to tell people to express your emotions if you feel it's necessary. Like, it's great.
If it's going to end up being worth the effort, again, that doesn't mean never express the emotion at all. You can go home, write about it in your journal, think about it, and be like, how can I work on this? But if it's going to be, like if it's with your coworker who you know doesn't respect you very much, and you go and you say, hey, it really bothers me when you do this, or like you really offended me when you said this.
They're not going to give a shit.
And you know that they're not going to care. You don't need to tell them that. Like, that's not necessary.
Right, it's not necessary. So then you just lay down your boundary. If you continue to do these things, I will remove myself from the situation.
Right.
Not everyone deserves your expression of emotion.
Yeah.
And that's totally fair.
Yeah.
So another thing that isn't a boundary is anything that concerns other people.
Right.
And what I mean by that is when you say something to the effect of like, oh, well, I don't like when you blah, 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 blah.
Right.
I don't like when you dress that way. I don't like when you act that way. I don't like when you speak that way, whatever it is.
Right.
That is not a boundary. That is a preference.
Right.
And voicing your preferences is fine, but expecting other people to uphold your preferences is a manipulation tactic.
Right. So, like, for instance, I can't turn to you and be like, well, I don't like that you wear yellow because it is too bright and it detracts from me. I don't know.
Well, damn.
That is not a boundary. That's just me being like, this is my preference.
Right.
I feel like a better example of a boundary would be like, I used a bad first example because I can't talk about your clothes and be like,
And that's a boundary, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so what if you use the example of like, someone said, I don't like when you get loud.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Like, I don't like when you yell, like, get loud, whatever, because it triggers my PTSD.
Right.
So
that's just a preference. That's not a boundary.
A preference. The way that you turn that into a boundary is then by being like, if you continue to get loud and yell, I am removing myself from the situation.
Yeah.
I think you'll notice that the key here is in order for you to uphold your boundaries is by saying, I'm going to remove myself. And whether that means that you get up and you walk away, or you just cut that person out of your life, or, you say, hey, like, I'm going to limit contact with this person to just, like, we're going to be more acquaintances than actual friends.
Right.
However you decide to remove yourself is up to you. And it's going to depend on the person, the situation, how much effort you want to put in. Mm-hmm. But you have to be the one to remove yourself, and that's how you uphold the boundary.
Yeah, a lot of the times, you will find that the way that you uphold a lot of these boundaries will just be to have to remove yourself from the situation because, again, you cannot control the way other people are going to react. You cannot control the things that other people are going to do, and you cannot expect other people to change their behavior because you have an issue with it. It's just not how it goes. It's just not how it goes. The only thing that we have control over ever in our entire lives is the way that we react to anything. The way you react to your emotions, the way that you react to a situation, the way that you react to other people. Like, that is the only thing that you can control. Can't even control your emotions or thoughts. You can only control your reactions to them.
Yeah.
That's it. And if you think that you can apply that to someone else or something else or someplace else, you're wrong. You're wrong.
Right.
You just can't. The only thing you can control is yourself and your reactions.
Yeah.
So things that are boundaries, this is my favorite part. 1, physical boundaries.
Yeah.
And physical boundaries are what I like to call the Bill of Rights for boundaries because they apply to everyone regardless of the situation. Okay?
Right.
So here's your physical boundaries. 1 is your physical space. Your body, however big, large, small, thin it is, that is your physical boundary, is your physical space.
Yeah. And then potentially along with that personal bubble. Right. And that can like change a little bit. That's a little bit more flexible, but you still have, like, there's that idea of physical space. Like, you go and stand in line in Walmart and you're not all up breathing in somebody's neck or ear. Like, you're given, everybody has a little bit of a personal bubble.
Right. Take it from our most recent pandemic, COVID. 6 feet around us, man. Like, I got a fucking bubble.
Yeah.
Stay out of my goddamn bubble. And for the most part, that changes. You're right. Because if I'm with someone intimate, my bubble with my partner is skin deep. You can go as close as I can get you. But, with you, it's more of like, we're going to hug. With a stranger, it's like, excuse me, I
don't
need 12
touch
feet.
me at all. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do not touch me at all.
Honestly, I was really loving, like, I'm not a touchy-feely person, and so I really didn't realize until the pandemic how much I liked having a larger bubble. And now that 6 feet is shrinking down again, sometimes I go and I am in public and I'm like, oh, I hate it.
Like, you are too close to me in line, dude.
Yeah, like, scoot back.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. So then the second physical boundary is privacy.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone is entitled to their own private time.
I mean, like, I'm pretty sure there's actual laws against, like, peeping Tom type behavior.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
You can go to jail for that shit.
That privacy is, like, an undeniable right. That's why we have all, like, toilet stalls. Like, we don't just piss in public.
Yep.
It's also why you can also get in trouble for doing that.
Please don't piss in public, you guys.
Yeah, let's not. But yeah, like, that right to privacy is a very physical boundary that you can assume every person has, and please do assume that every person has.
And respect that.
Yes.
The last physical boundary that I set is your time.
Yeah.
Because even though time is not like a tangible thing that we can touch and feel and hear or whatever, unless you've got a clock on you, I guess, then you can hear the ticking of the seconds. But then you're hearing the clock, you're not actually hearing time. Anyways, I digress. The point is, is that time is one of the physical barriers that applies to every single one of us.
Right.
And you should respect that each person is allowed to do with their time what they will.
Right.
So that I wanted to encapsulate as a physical boundary as well, because again, everyone has it. It's a basic right of boundaries, and you should assume and respect that everyone has their own preferences on what they want to do with their time.
We all have the same 24 hours in a day, and it is up to us to determine how we are going to spend it.
Right.
And yeah, you need to be respectful of other people's times. I think that one's a little bit of a gray area, because in some ways I think it can cross over out of a physical boundary. But yeah, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. So it's not like somebody else is out here, it has all this extra time that they get to do whatever else they want with. So.
Yeah, no one has a longer day than you. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah.
Okay, so another example of what a boundary is emotional boundaries. These are made individually to protect a person's emotions and experiences.
Right.
And this is something that we've already talked about when we said, I don't like when you, or like when you get your feelings hurt. That's really what we're here to protect is, yes, express your emotional preferences, right? But also solidify emotional boundaries.
Right.
So if it hurts your feelings when people comment on your body, then establish, listen, if you talk about my body, then I will remove myself from the situation. If it hurts your feelings when
people don't respect your time or your profession or something, and they either talk badly about it or don't put any effort into showing, like, for instance, if you have a friend who's always late and you're like, this is my boundary, that you're going to be more respectful of my time because you might have plans after your plans with them, and them being late every time, if that hurts your feelings or frustrates you and you consider it disrespectful, your boundary can then be like, if you continue to be more than, let's say, 15 minutes late, I'm just going to leave.
Yeah.
We're not going to hang out anymore. I'm not going to wait for you at the restaurant. I'm not going to pick you up, whatever that situation is.
Yeah. I feel like that is more of a way to uphold your physical boundaries. And I was more looking for a way to uphold an emotional boundary.
Okay.
So like maybe something on disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
But that's
okay, so the profession thing again. So like when you talked about you quit architecture, and people were saying, you're crazy, you're throwing your life away, whatever.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
You can, a boundary that I think potentially you did actually uphold and state was, if you continue to tell me this, we're not going to have any more conversations about my career.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good one because it hurt my feelings for people to tell me that I was batshit crazy.
Yeah.
I already felt scared enough about the decision I was making. I already felt unconfident in it enough, and I did not need people to encourage my inconfidence.
Right. Also, just allow people to make their own mistakes. So
Absolutely.
What if you were throwing your life away? Like, if that's what you really felt like you needed to do, like, who am I to sit here and be like, no, you're throwing your life away. This is stupid. You're insane.
Right.
Like, why does it matter?
Right.
Like, obviously you want what's best for them, but like, allow them to make their own mistakes.
Right. It's one thing to voice your concerns and be like, I'm concerned that you maybe didn't think this all the way through. And that's fair and valid. But the point of being someone's friend or being their support system is to, yes, absolutely, allow them to make their own mistakes and then to be there to help them pick up the pieces. Right. But when you immediately just assume that someone is crazy for doing something that you wouldn't do, one, you're invalidating their experience. Two, you're assuming off the bat that these people are incapable of doing the thing that they're saying they're doing.
And that you're better than them.
Yeah, or that they're incapable of picking up the pieces should they fail. when they fail, because oftentimes we do fail. It took me 2 years after quitting my career to figure out what the fuck I even wanted to do after that. And I just spent the 2 years literally doing quote unquote nothing, according to some people who have an opinion on my life. And and you know what? I needed that time. That was rest time for me. That was my hermit year. Figure out what the fuck you want to do. Figure out who you are. Figure out what you need. And I needed that time. It was rest time for me. So
yeah. Sometimes I feel like the reason that I'm not like as into that, not that, and that's not a good, I mean, I am as into this. It's just that like I feel more overwhelmed by it than you do. And I think it's because I'm still so burnt out because I never got to quit my career. I haven't done that yet. And so I haven't caught up to you in the needing to go on and do something more now because I'm still like, I'm in the more and I'm fucking tired.
Yeah, I feel that.
Except that it's the more that I don't even know that I want to be doing.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed this next job is better. And if it's not, we're done.
Yeah, I really hope. Well, genuinely, I don't know what I hope for you. I hope that you will eventually figure out what makes you happy. Like, end of story, regardless. But I don't know if I hope that this next job works out for you, or if I hope that it sucks so that you finally quit. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know which way I want to root here. I'm rooting for happiness either way.
If it makes you feel better, I don't know either.
Yeah, I figured.
A part of me is rooting for this is going to be it and I'm going to find that passion again.
Because it's comfortable. You already know what to do. You already know how to do the job.
Well, and I really do feel like I was kind of wavering and the universe was like, here. Yeah. Here is your decision. Yeah. And so in some ways I'm like, maybe that really means that I am going to find my passion again. But it could also be the opposite where the universe was like, here's your decision. But it's gonna fucking suck. And that's the push that I'm gonna need to be like, no, fuck this.
See, I think, if I may hypothesize about what the universe's message is for you, I think that the one thing holding you back from leaving this field entirely is the question of, is it just this firm? Yeah. And I think the universe is like,
here's the answer.
Here's your answer.
Figure it out, yeah.
So you're going to find out if it is just the one firm or not.
Yeah.
And
I feel like it's going to happen relatively quick. I think a lot of that is because it is not necessarily that new firm is going to be so much better or so much worse, but just because since I'm already in burnout, I'm going to feel some type of way pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Yeah, because if something doesn't shift soon, something's going to collapse.
Yeah. So, but like at this point, I'm just like, I feel like this was the universe giving me whatever I needed at that point. And yeah, whether that ends up being like, hey, we're telling you that you need to get the fuck out, or whether it is like, hey, no, like this is a better experience and you love it again. We'll see.
Either way, it's an experience and we're learning from it.
Yes. Anyways, now that we've dived off the deep end into our next tangent, we covered a couple of emotional boundaries talking about, you know, if you don't want people to talk about your body, or if you don't want people to talk about your career choices, or those could be other life choices too, like the person that you're dating.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Where you want to go move.
How you raise your children.
Yeah, what religion you are. Like, that can cover a lot of stuff.
Absolutely.
And so those are emotional boundaries.
Yeah, when you're protecting your experience from a situation. Right. However you feel is necessary to uphold those, whether it be as small as leaving the conversation or changing the conversation, or as grand scale as completely burning a bridge. I don't always recommend burning bridges because the whole point of us being here is to learn how to connect with people regardless of their background. And I think when we immediately cut people off, we're ultimately losing more than we're gaining because we're losing that connection. But I will also 100% state that some people, it's too much. It costs too much energy. It costs too much peace to maintain a relationship with certain people. And at that point, 100%, you have to cut your losses. And that is a part of balance. We have to know when tough people are worth it, and we have to know when it's just a fucking lost cause.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a little bit of that is going to be how well you know that person.
Oh,
so
for
like
sure.
when we were talking about grace and like, you know, dating, and you see that barest little hint of a red flag and you're just like duck
I'm
and
out.
run. Like that is potentially not, that might be premature, and you're not giving the people that grace that potentially could show that they're that much better. But I think, you know, if you have someone like a family member that you have known, and this has been an issue that has been going on forever, and it is truly, truly degrading your mental health exponentially, cut them off.
Yeah. Like a dead fucking weight, like a hot fucking potato.
Yeah.
Whatever little idiom you want to use.
All right. So we talked about emotional boundaries and how far you're going to go to uphold them. And we'll get back to that a little bit more. But I think there's a third kind of boundary.
These are my favorite kind of boundaries. Sexual boundaries.
And honestly, I think these are a great way to kind of talk about boundaries that you probably are already talking about and enforcing. If you're a sexually active person, or have ever been a sexually active person,
which most of us are.
Yeah. Or you ever have been in any sort of, even if you're not sexually active, I think you kind of touch on this, because
any kind of intimate situation.
Yeah, if you're with somebody and you're like, well, I'm not ready to go that far, that's already a boundary. So like, you know, this is something, I think sometimes we think about emotional boundaries and these new things, because it is a little bit of a therapy speak type thing.
Yeah.
It can be really scary, but you've probably already done it.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. And I feel like sexual boundaries is this cute little gray area between physical boundaries and emotional boundaries.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, you can already automatically assume everyone has a sexual boundary.
Yes.
There, like your physical body being a sexual boundary. Do not touch me.
Yeah.
Straight off. Or do touch me. You know what I mean? Like whatever that boundary is.
Right.
But then also an emotional boundary, because obviously sex is so emotional. Even if you're one of those casual guys or gals who's like, oh, I just fuck for fun. That is still like an energetic experience that you are sharing with someone. And if you think that your emotions are not involved at all, you are very, very wrong. I'm sorry to tell you, but...
And it's scientifically proven that there are emotional chemicals released during sex and once you know, get to the fun part.
That's called an orgasm.
I was going to not say it, but yeah. When you climax, when you come, when you finish, whatever you want to say.
When you reach the loop-de-loop of the roller coaster.
The woo, oh my God.
When we reach the woo. That's what I'm calling it from now on. I'm going to be in the middle of having sex and go woo, and my partner's going to be like, what the fuck just happened? Did you just woo at me?
Once you explain it, he's going to fucking hate me. He's going to be like,
damn it, it was in our sex life.
Yeah. I don't know if I like that.
It's not in a weird way.
Honestly. She doesn't cross any boundaries.
I try really hard. There's no, I don't like making other people feel uncomfortable. I don't like being uncomfortable. I don't want to make another person feel uncomfortable. And I genuinely think it's hot when people express their boundaries, especially their sexual ones, because I want to know where not to cross. I want to know what to cross.
Well, and like, I feel like ideally if you're having sex with somebody, you want everybody to have a good time. Like yourself, them, any additional partners. I don't know your life. Anyways, but you want everybody to have a good time. So why are you going to want to cross somebody's boundaries if they've told you that, like, I don't like that?
Right. Why are you going to want to kill the buzz, man?
Yeah.
The thing about sexual boundaries is that they're extremely personal, they're extremely individualized, and they're deeply intimate. And I think that is a part that makes them so magnificent and so intriguing, and I think also the thing that makes them kind of a little intimidating and a little scary. But having sexual boundaries and being able to effectively communicate them protects our desires, and it keeps sex safe and fun and everyone coming back for more, you know? So, and that's ultimately what we want, whether your goal is to procreate or not. We want to have fun when we're having sex, and we want it to be a shame-free environment. And in doing that, it requires a little bit of upfront communication. And even if it's awkward, like, who cares? It'll stop being awkward the second you stop thinking it's awkward. Right. The second you start thinking about sexual boundary communication as a little bit of foreplay, then it'll become fun and hot and sexy and like all the things that we want sex to be.
Yeah. And it's something, I think sexual boundaries are also interesting too, because I think oftentimes our emotional boundaries are kind of set once you figure them out. Like,
sure.
I mean, yes, they can change, but I think a lot of the times, like, they're probably going to stay mostly the same, but I think sexual boundaries definitely can change, and I think oftentimes they do change, sometimes in the middle of sex, and that is A-okay, and it can still be hot and okay to be like, ooh, I don't like this anymore, I'm done, we need to do something different, and that is totally fine.
Yeah, it can be as easy as, ooh, let's switch positions.
Yeah.
It can be as casual as that, and then you can talk about it later, you know, if it's like awkward. But and you're totally right. Things can start as a yes and end as a no, and that is allowed.
Yes.
Even if you get a little frustrated by someone changing their mind in the middle of it, that frustration is your problem, not theirs.
Yep. You can go home and take care of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. But boundaries. The thing about boundaries is they have to be firm, and they need to be non-negotiable. You don't get to compromise on your boundaries. No one gets to...
And you don't have to compromise.
No.
I think that... And you don't get to try and compromise with somebody else about their boundaries.
Exactly.
And you also do not need to allow compromises of your boundaries.
Right. And these, while they need to be firm and non-negotiable, they also need to be communicated clearly and unambiguously. Like, there needs to be no question about what you mean, what action you plan to take. It needs to be communicated as quickly as possible, as soon as it is applicable to apply the communication. Right. That's when these things need to be said, not when there's any time for a miscommunication.
Yeah.
Or for someone to misinterpret you.
And I mean, it can be, you know, because I think sometimes it's not as simple as you meet somebody and you're like, all right, we're going to sit down and go over my boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
So there can be, like, ideally the situation will be your boundaries have already been communicated, and so the person loves you enough and respects you enough that they're not going to compromise the boundary. However, if you are in a situation where this person doesn't know your boundary and does cross it, that at that point is... I liked what you said earlier, as soon as it's applicable.
Yeah.
So I think as soon as they cross your boundary, you're like, nope, this is my boundary, you don't do that. Or if it's something where, since this is kind of a new thing that we're starting to do more commonly now, and we're starting to figure out how to do this, I think it's something where, like, let's say a family member, like a sibling or something in your past, has compromised your boundaries, but you've just now realized, like, this is something that I need to set up as a boundary and communicate. You can then go and be like, hey, listen, you remember this instance, and we got into a big fight or something, or I was really upset, or whatever it was. That's when you can go and be like, hey, I realized what it was. This is my boundary. You crossed it. If it happens again, and again, however you decide that you're going to uphold it.
Right. Going forward, this is how I would like things to go on.
Yeah.
And again, don't let us confuse you with our casual tone and our comfy ass chairs and our squeaky ass little table. Upholding your boundaries is not at all for the weak of stomach. This shit is scary, hard work. It's painful sometimes, emotionally, and the rewards often only come long after you've already done the work.
Oh my God, you are literally so right.
I wish I wasn't.
I'm still not seeing some of the rewards because I'm still, you know, figuring out some of my boundaries.
Yeah.
So, like one that I've had recently is there was an issue with some family members, I'm not going to say who, where, you know, to me, I found it very disrespectful. And, you know, I'm willing to sit here and look at things from their perspective and understand where they're coming from. But they disrespected my time in a way that I'm just not going to allow again in the future.
Yeah.
And I haven't really yet seen those rewards. And honestly, that's fine for right now. Because for me, I'm not putting in the effort to truly like cut people off when I haven't really had a close relationship with them to begin with.
Right, sure.
So it would be more effort for me to try and cut them out of my life entirely than it is for me to just be like, you know what, I'm just going to limit the way that I interact with them.
Yeah.
And so, and that way I can kind of control and uphold my own boundary by being like, you know what, we're not going to ever put myself in that situation where they can disrespect my time like that again, because to me that was unacceptable. Mm-hmm. And I'm not asking them to change.
Exactly.
I'm just not going to put myself in that situation again.
Which is exactly the way that boundaries should be upheld. That you're exactly in the correct stance in the way that it should be gone about procedurally, I guess, if you want to say that. And I think at the end of the day, once we do start to see rewards, maybe the reward will just be that, you know, you don't see them very as often, or that you get to feel more in charge of your time again. Yeah. And that would be a reward that no one else would notice except for you. And that kind of becomes part of the issue with boundaries, is when you don't notice other people getting rewards from the work that they're putting in for their boundaries, it's hard for you to think that it's worth it, especially if no one's communicating the rewards that they're getting based off of the boundaries that they're setting.
And we have such a like instant gratification mindset these days too, that I think that's another thing, is like there's this expectation maybe that like you're going to set up this boundary and immediately everybody's going to respect it and like they're going to potentially change their behavior. And like that's just, I don't think that that is the expectation that you should have when you go into the boundary, because potentially it's going to be harder than when somebody does disrespect it. Yeah. But also, again, we're not putting up boundaries as this threat to make people change their behavior.
No.
And I think that's the hardest part to realize, is like, for instance, if somebody's like always late, like I had said before, like that lateness, my goal is not to make them be on time necessarily. Right. If they care about me enough, ideally they're going to be more respectful and be on time. Yeah. But that's never the goal. The goal is to take care of myself. And so if they're not on time, I'm just going to continue along with whatever else I had planned.
Right. Right. And if you had specific plans with that person who is continually late, if we're carrying on with this example,
right?
If you had to deal with that person on a one-on-one situation, you would essentially say, listen, I would like for us to meet up. This is the time frame that I have. Regardless of what time you show up, I have to leave at this specific time.
Right.
So if you are 15 minutes late, you are losing 15 minutes of my time.
Right.
I will not give you the full hour because you showed up 15 minutes late. You will get an hour from 3 to 4, whatever, if we're being specific about it. Mm-hmm. And if you show up at 3:15, then you just lost 15 minutes of my time. That's it. And that could be a way that you uphold that boundary with another person, specifically if it's related to time.
Yes. Yeah.
But like we said before, whereas you, this time, with your family member, are not cutting them off and just limiting your contact, there have been times where cutting them off is going to be necessary. And because sometimes people will not uphold your boundaries, regardless of how well you communicate them, regardless of how valid they may be. Sometimes people are just going to choose that they don't have to do whatever it is.
Yeah.
They don't have to respect that aspect of your person. And cutting them off ends up being what's best for your mental health and your emotional health. And that's hard, especially when it's family. Like, because specifically, I know on this pod I've talked about my biological sperm donor, and obviously that means he was my dad at some point, right? But the abuse that I suffered at his hand was one thing, right? Completely unforgivable. But I tried to continue the relationship after that, and I tried to grow the relationship. But in order to do that, I felt like I needed to find some closure on the previous experiences that we had had together. And not only did he tell me to grow the fuck up and to get over it, rather than actually moving through these issues together, he then told me...
validating your feelings and your experiences.
Right. Because that would have been nice.
Right.
But instead of doing any of that, he told me to grow the fuck up and get over it, and that the things that he did to me were supposed to be jokes. And that him violating my personal boundaries and my personal space was supposed to be funny. And that because he intended it to be a joke, that since I didn't think it was funny, I was being a child.
Well, and that clearly, since the way that he intended it to come across disrespected your boundaries, or the way that it came across disrespected your boundaries in a different way than he intended it, but he's still crossing your boundaries.
Right.
And he clearly didn't respect the fact that it was still crossing your boundaries, even though he didn't intend for that to happen.
Yeah.
Because that's total... People can have lived the same experience and that they were both there together, and person A and person B can have two different experiences entirely in their mind with the way that a situation goes.
Absolutely.
And each experience, person A and person B, is potentially valid.
Right.
But you still have to have a respect for each experience.
Right.
And he clearly was like, your experience doesn't matter because it's not the way I intended you to experience it.
Exactly. And there was no willingness to be able to communicate that, or even to express any sort of remorse that I had, quote unquote, misinterpreted that experience. And so I decided right then and there that I was just done. I mean, obviously there were a few other instances that led up to me deciding that this was probably going to be the best part. One of them being the fact that all of our conversations ended in arguments. I'm telling you right now, if you have a relationship with someone and you cannot maintain a civil conversation with them at any point, that is a toxic relationship and you need to reevaluate. Because under no circumstances should there be any type of relationship in which compromise does not exist. Like, just period. Point blank, end of story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's no... Disrespect is not necessary. There is no need for us to be name-calling, for us to be gaslighting, for us to be controlling or manipulating or abusing. This will be another pod that I go over about suffering and why suffering is only necessary to prove that it's not necessary. But I want to just make that one point there, that suffering is literally only necessary to prove that suffering is not necessary. It's here because of balance, because without lightness, you can't have darkness. Without darkness, you can't have lightness, vice versa.
Yeah.
But it's only here to prove that it's not necessary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you have a relationship that is consistent of purely suffering, please reevaluate. Please seek help. Please leave that relationship.
Yes.
There's also a matter of sometimes you will not be the person who chooses to end the relationship. Sometimes, and this has been something that I have had to deal with most recently this year, is that sometimes you will stand up for your boundaries and uphold your boundaries, and other people will decide that that is not worth it. And they will leave.
Yes.
And that hurts too, because it makes you think you're unworthy of having these boundaries. It makes you think that you are not worth the work to put in to respect your personhood. And that hurts just as much, if not more so, than you deciding that you need to cut it off. Because when you decide that you need to cut it off, then you have that closure.
Yeah.
This was my decision, even if it hurts.
I think one thing that might help feel just a little bit better is that the people that are going to be the most upset when you start upholding your boundaries and being firm in your boundaries are the people that were benefiting from you not having boundaries.
Oh shit, that really hurt me for a second.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. I needed to be hurt that way. Because you're absolutely
It still
right.
fucking sucks, but
It does.
the people who are gonna scream and shout the loudest as you put your foot down are the people that were walking all over you because you weren't putting your foot down.
Wow. Yeah. Fuck. You're so right though, because like genuinely with my sperm donor, the reason he didn't want to uphold those was because he got to feel like he was a good dad by me still talking to him and like having this relationship with him. He got to feel like he was still top dog. And by me cutting him off, he now feels like a failure as a parent.
Yeah.
And then I'll just put this out there, my friends, I had a lot of my friends break up with me this year. A lot of my friends that I've had like since high school. But the reason I believe that happened is because I was a very different person in high school. I was a lot more aggressive. I was a lot more self-centered. I was a lot more closed-minded. I just didn't have as much perspective as I do now. I didn't have as much empathy. And I feel like my friends at the time benefited from me being that way because they didn't have to look at themselves.
Yeah.
They didn't have to think that they were doing anything wrong. They didn't have to readjust their character in any way. And when I started recognizing that the way we were treating each other was actually genuinely disrespectful, and that I stopped tolerating that, immediately they wanted nothing to do with me anymore.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah. Because they were benefiting from being able to be disrespectful to you. Yeah. And I think, fucking props to you for being so self-reflective to be like, I was part of the problem
Oh,
in the
100%.
beginning. Love the accountability.
Thank you. It's
but
hard.
then also, like, I've recognized that in myself, like them on their end, with you, actually. I've
how
never
so?
told you this before, but every once in a while, I would get, and I think sometimes I still do, but it's much quicker to get out of my system now, where like, as you were growing and becoming this person that's like so focused on your mental health and like being a better person, I started to be like, God, she's so fucking annoying for doing this shit. I'm like, you don't have to be perfect all the fucking time. Like, just let me live. And like, I started to realize, I was like, you know what? I'm the problem, because like, I'm recognizing that like, you're growing past me, and I was like, God damn it, I don't want to do that. Like, that's fucking hard work. Like, I don't want to do that. And I quickly realized, I was like, you gotta let that go. Like, it's okay if she surpasses me, because we're not gonna grow at the same rate. Yeah.
We have to grow together.
Yeah. And B, yes, sometimes it can feel annoying to constantly check yourself and check your accountability, and it can feel like kind of a downer, but like it also becomes more subconscious the more you do it. And if you're not doing it, you're not going to grow. And like you said, the whole thing with like suffering is only there to realize that it's not necessary. You have to be able to grow to get out of some of that suffering.
Right.
So yeah, it might suck a little bit while you're going through that growth, but eventually you're going to get to the place where it's better and you don't feel like you're suffering so much anymore. So.
Yeah. And I love that you, one, felt confident that I was not going to be upset that you told me that I was annoying, because I 100% I understand. But I also feel like to that point is when I first started my healing journey, I was still utilizing a lot of the toxic traits in order to progress my own journey. Mm-hmm. In that, I mean that I was judging openly if you were not on my level. You know what I mean? It was more of I was using my healing journey to make myself feel more than, better than, higher than other people. And I have recognized, mostly in my relationship with my siblings, because they're the ones who are more willing to be the most blunt with me, that I was essentially treating it like a dogma. You know what I mean? I was like trying to enforce that everyone act up according to these new standards, these higher standards that I had set for myself. And I have since realized that you're right, not everyone's going to grow on the same scale as me, and it is not my responsibility to make sure that I pull everyone up to what I deem as my level. Because I need to understand that everyone's experiences are valid, and even if they seem less complex than the experiences that I've gone through, they still have beneficiary values. And
if I may, I think it's also that, just like we were talking about person A and person B, you know, because I've had a similar experience. After my dad died, people would tell me like stuff they were going through, and I had a hot minute there where I was sitting in my grief and I was like, I don't give a fuck about what you're going through, because it is not as bad as what I'm going through.
Right.
Obviously very wrong of me for multiple reasons, because like you're saying, it might not seem as complex, but maybe for what that person's life has been, it is just as complex as what we've gone through, because A, we don't know every single aspect of their life, and B, it might not necessarily, it's not something that you could necessarily quantify. And so even if you could and say like, well, it's mine was this complexity and theirs was this complexity, if they've only ever had complexity way down here,
right,
anything higher than that, of course, is going to seem just as complex and just as horrible. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I get where you're coming from, because, yeah, I've had some times where I was like, get over it.
Right. And it's moments like that where you have to step back and not necessarily listen to the words that they're saying, but try to recognize what they're doing with their words, which is trying to empathize and connect with you. Mm-hmm. So regardless of how dumb you think it is, you know what I mean, the exact words that they're using or the exact experience that they've shared with you, to be able to step back and recognize, oh, they're just trying to connect with me and trying to help me with my suffering.
Right. And it's really easy to, I think, no matter how much empathy you are capable of, it's never the same as having gone through that exact experience, right, and reliving that exact experience that somebody's telling you about. So like going back to cutting off your biological sperm donor, I'm like, I can never relate to that entirely because I've never gone through an experience quite like that.
Right.
So I'm like, I can sit here and recognize that obviously that was really hard and you had a lot of emotional stuff going on with that, but I can never be like, and quantify that in a way that's like, oh, well, I went through something worse because of this.
Right.
You know, like I would never compare, for instance, my dad dying to you cutting your sperm donor off, because like very different
Types of
things,
loss.
first of all.
Very different types of loss.
Yeah. And like,
but still essentially the same, because the same grief essentially, because we both lost a connection with our fathers. We both no longer have a relationship with the individual. And a lot of the, well, yeah, I mean, I guess technically you could still have a relationship with your father.
yeah.
Better than I could.
Probably, yeah. Shit. But yeah,
still, it's still a grief.
You can still, compare as in like, we both lost our fathers, and like we don't have that communication with them anymore necessarily. So
right.
Yeah.
And while this is not directly connected to the topic that we had today, I feel like grief is still very much correlated with establishing your boundaries. There is always, unfortunately, I'm sorry to be the bearer of this bad news, but there is almost always some form of grief connected with upholding your boundaries, because one, you risk disappointing someone, quote unquote, because you have adjusted or adapted their view of you, and they're probably not going to like that. Or the end result is you have to limit your contact with someone, and maybe, you had a lot of contact with them previously, and now you have to do that kind of quickly, and there's still room for grief there. But then also, if you have to cut someone off, or if someone decides to leave you, it's just, it leaves a lot of room for grief.
Yeah, and I totally agree. But I think also we're focusing on the grief that happens once you establish your boundaries, and when things
don't go right.
People react negatively potentially.
Yeah.
But there's also so much grief attached to not having firm boundaries or not upholding them.
Yeah, actually, yes.
Like, I went through a relationship in college, and first relationship where I was like super in love with the guy, and I didn't have good boundaries at that time. I hadn't become as in tune with my emotions, and I just, I was young, I was naive, I didn't know what was going on. I was just like, I love this man, we're gonna get married and live happily ever after. Clearly didn't happen, but I went through so much grief in that relationship, partially because it was a super unhealthy relationship, but I can also recognize, and I probably never would have had a healthy relationship with this man, but I can also recognize that I did not have good boundaries, because I was not being respectful enough to myself to think about the things that were bothering me and find a way to uphold those boundaries.
Yeah. And that causes also a lot of turmoil inside you, a lot of chaos and grief and remorse.
Yeah, I had many times where I was super unhappy, and I felt crazy for being upset by things, and he would manipulate me so much. So this is something that can also happen, and it's part of why you have to be so firm in your boundaries and not compromise them, because he would manipulate me. So like, I would say, and again, I wasn't communicating them well, I hadn't gotten to this point, but I would still say, like, I don't like it when this sort of situation happens. We need to figure out a way that, like, this can't happen anymore. And he, much like your sperm donor, would say, well, that wasn't my intent. And like, I would come out of these arguments, because it would always turn into an argument. We could never have a civil conversation about something that was bothering me.
Shocker.
I know, wild. But, I wasn't upholding those boundaries then, because he would manipulate it and turn it around, and I would be like, you know what, maybe I am being unfair, or, I'm not listening to your side of the story, or I don't know what's going on in your mind, which all valid, except for the fact that, yes, he can validate his lived experience, but that does not negate my lived experience, and he should have never been disrespectful of that.
Yeah.
And so that's where that disconnect was with that one. But yeah, you really have to stand firm in your fucking boundaries
Exactly.
because there are probably going to be people who are going to try and manipulate them.
Absolutely. There are going to be people who try to manipulate your boundaries even if you are firm in them, because everyone's going to try.
That too. Yeah.
Well, maybe not everyone, but someone's going to try.
yeah.
Yeah, and so people will actually try to manipulate your boundaries even if you are firm on them, just because they can, genuinely.
Well, and again, because going back to it's benefiting them probably.
Right. There's this thing that recently I have done, and I have a birth name. Obviously, everyone does, right? But it is not Rick. I will not tell you what it is because I hate it. But it's my sperm donor's name. Just the female version of it. It's stupid. I literally, not even joking, you have always hated it. Ever since I was a child, I used to go by my middle name. I used to tell people my name was Lynette because my middle name is Lynn.
That should tell you something because I apologize to your younger self, but Lynette's not a super great name.
No, it's not. But I thought it was better than my birth name, genuinely. And I just hated it. I hated it so much. I was like, why can't I have my own name, be my own fucking person? I'm sure not all juniors feel that way, but I did. And if you were like me, whatever. Anyways, but the point is that once I decided I wanted nothing to do with that side of the family, I no longer wanted his name. For obvious reasons. I don't want his debt calls anymore. Genuinely. Like, I'm not him. I'm a woman. Don't call me. I don't want his debt. I'm not going to get his money for you. So that was reason number one. But reason number two is because I wanted to be my own person. And Rick is a name that my auntie from a long time ago, rest in peace, she is gone now, but she started that when I was a wee little grasshopper, and then when I was bartending, it came back up just naturally. Some random coworker was like, "Yo, Rick," and I was like, "How did you know that?" And she was like, "Well, it's short for your birth name," and I was like, "Oh, you're fucking right." Oh my god, because I had pulled it from Ricky Tikki Tavi, the mongoose. I was obsessed with him, and that's where my auntie pulled it from, but I didn't realize that it was short for that. And then also my mom told me that I had an uncle when I was born who called me Little Rick because his name was Rick, and he had apparently recognized that that was also an acronym for what my name was, and he was like, "Oh, it's Little Rick." So, but I decided that that was going to be a permanent change well into my adulthood.
It's only been like 2 years now?
Yeah, ever since I started at the new job and quit. I'm telling you, quitting architecture was a fucking dimensional shift for me, because not only did I change my entire persona and shifted my growth upwards, but I also changed my fucking name. And so it's just like has been a whole thing for me. But a lot of people, honestly, the ones who I've had to cut off or who have cut me off since that point, had a big issue with it, refused to call me Rick, would constantly call me by the dead name to other people. Like to you, I had an instance where I threw a party, and there was a collective mix of people I knew now and people I knew in my past there, and people who I no longer speak to insisted on calling me by a dead name at that party. And half the people who were there were like, "Who the fuck are you even talking about? I don't know who that person is. I only know a Rick."
Yeah.
And it was devastating to me to know that my friends of 10 plus years would not respect the idea that I was trying to embody a new version of myself. It was gut-wrenching.
Especially when, like, if somebody decides that they want to change their name, be respectful of that, no matter what it is. But the fact that yours is like a derivative of your birth name, so it's not that far off anyways, and
Literally.
I can't even respect it.
It's less syllables for you. I'm creating less work.
Yeah.
You should be generous. You should be thankful.
Yeah, absolutely.
My first name was 3 syllables long. Like, Jesus fuck. Stupid.
Cut it down by 2/3.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, Regardless, I think that just boils down to people don't really like change, and they don't want to facilitate change within themselves, and so therefore they definitely don't want to encourage or uphold change within other people. And that is a them problem. It's not a you problem. And I decided not to take it personally that people weren't upholding my name change. Anytime anyone uses the dead name, I just say, my name is Ricky. I treat it as if I don't even know what that name is. I don't treat it as a disrespect. A lot of the time I recognize that they're just trying to break a mental pattern that they've had. But yeah, sometimes it is disrespectful. And I 100% noticed that. I'm not dumb. I wasn't born yesterday. I was born at night, not last night.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, that's not true at all. I was born at 5:32 in the morning, 5:23 in the morning.
That's sort of night.
The sun's not up yet. If you're in Texas, which I was.
Yeah.
But regardless of whether or not people decide to uphold your boundaries, regardless of how much grief you go through because of those choices, it is always still worth it.
Yeah.
For so many reasons.
Yeah.
Just like autonomy for being one, improved mental health. I have a whole list here. Better relationships, helps ward off burnout, which is like a whole situation of being mindful of your yeses, which is a boundary that can apply to your physical boundaries, to your emotional boundaries, to your sexual boundaries. Being mindful of where you assert your attention and time and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Increased compassion for yourself and others, decreased resentment, decreased unchecked rage. There are so many benefits to taking care of yourself and establishing how far you can extend and how far you're willing to let people in. Benefits out the ass.
Yeah. And if you're in a situation where somebody is constantly like trying to take advantage of you, I mean, getting rid of that relationship, if that's what ends up happening, or if you uphold your boundaries and they end up starting to respect those, like, it's just always going to be better than feeling like you're not worth it.
Right.
Like, and I know that that's a big issue that a lot of people have. It's something that I'm still trying to get better about, is feeling like a burden.
Ugh.
But you are worth your boundaries.
Yep.
Whatever boundaries those are that you pick for yourself, you are worth it.
Oh my God. I literally, okay. So during the last watch party, I literally made my partner shut it off. I made him shut it off because I was having a complete breakdown about one, imposter syndrome, thinking, who the fuck am I to be talking on any of this? And also, do I deserve this space I'm taking up in doing this?
Yes.
I'm gonna cry with how instantaneous your answer was right now. That was very sweet. But that was my issue.
Just, I think part of the physical boundaries we talked about before is whatever space you decide you want to take up, you deserve. Nobody gets to tell you that. You get to pick that. I'm gonna cry. But you get to pick it how much space you want to take up. Yeah. And nobody can tell you that you're taking up too much space. Like, okay, Taylor Swift haters. I'm going to talk about that because we talked about her at work today and it's on my mind. People constantly hate on her because she's this big, fabulous pop star. And they're like, oh, and I'm not a huge Taylor Swift fan. Don't, like, take this as me fangirling because I don't really listen to her music.
Right.
But, like, she's choosing how much space she's taking up, and she's doing it so unapologetically.
Yeah.
And she deserves that. Whether I like her music and I am a fan or not, she deserves however much space she chooses to take up. Yeah. And we all get that same worth.
Yeah. And
we
choice and
all get that. We all deserve that choice.
Yeah. But you're right. That is, it's really difficult to think that you deserve that because we're in a society that tries to minimalize us so much. Mm-hmm. My partner literally he forced me to say, I am Rick, and I am worthy of the space that I take up. And I could not do it. I could not do it for a good solid 15 minutes. I was like, I don't want to. I don't want to. Because I genuinely did not think that I was worth it. And God, it's hard.
It's really, really hard.
And I don't even have an answer for you for how to make yourself feel more deserving, other than to recognize that other people feel exactly the same way.
I think you can start with small things. Start with posting on social media more.
Yeah.
That's something that I want to start doing, because I think what happened in my mind is I'm like, I don't have anything important to put on social media. Who the fuck cares? It doesn't have to be important. Take up space. If that's what you want to do, do it. If you're a private person and social media isn't your thing for whatever reason, as long as it's not something that you're doing to limit yourself, if you just don't like people seeing that sort of stuff, do something else.
Yeah, connect with people on a more intimate level. Be vulnerable more.
Talk more about your passions, you know, even if it's something that you think is weird or that isn't popular enough and people aren't going to want to talk about it anyways.
Yeah. Be curious with yourself. Wonder how much space you could take up. Experiment with it and see how much space feels appropriate for you, whether that be in a metaphorical sense or in a physical sense. A way that helps me to establish how much space I am taking up and to be okay with that is to reorganize my apartment. It seems kind of silly, but I do it very often, and it helps me, one, in a physical sense, it helps me reorganize things that I can't get out of my brain. So it takes something that seems very minute that I don't really have to think about, but the physical sense of reorganizing things in my home allows me to put my thoughts into different perspectives, allows me to see the things that I already own in different viewpoints, in different spots. And that was actually what had triggered the whole breakdown of moving, was because my computer stopped working in my office. And I was already concerned by the fact that we live in a 2-bedroom apartment. So I was concerned by the fact that I was already taking up an entire room to myself. And I just didn't think that it was fair to my partner. I didn't think that I deserved that whole room. And then when my situation stopped working for me and I had to move into another bigger space, I felt way more, just like I was taking up more space that I didn't deserve. But that's not true, ever. So I think a great way to be able to combat this is to be able to send everyone with an activity of how to set healthy boundaries. And I think the first step of that is to get aware. What kind of boundaries do you need? Where do you need to expand? Where do you need to grow? How can you set that up for yourself? The second one is to be clear. Keep it simple, communicate it clearly, and as soon as possible. The next one, follow through. Be brave enough to uphold your boundaries. It is hard work, but you are worthy of your boundaries. You deserve to have them upheld and respected. Next is the hardest one probably, and that's accepting the discomfort that follows. There may be personal discomfort, including the shame or the guilt or remorse from being able to uphold those, from having to enforce those, and the discomfort that comes with other people and their pushback or their defensiveness. And last but not least, remember that it is 110,000% worth it. Even if it's just for your own personal autonomy, even if it's for better relationships in your life, it is always worth it.
Absolutely. That was beautiful. I don't have anything to add. No notes.
Great. Well, then I think that's all the time that we have for today. My phone is already telling me that it's at like 15%.
That means mine's probably already dead.
So we're very excited that you were here listening to us. Please feel free to take what you need and leave what you don't, and go ahead and join us in the next chat if you feel like it.
And don't forget to check out all of our social media pages. We've got like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok.
All the stuff.
Yeah, all of the things. We're going to be posting bloopers and bonus content, And then helpful things. I think last week we had posted about grace, or maybe it wasn't last week. It's going to be 2 weeks ago. But we had posted, our grace acronyms. So if you follow us on social media, if you feel like it, also give us a shout and let us know stuff that you want us to talk about. We want to help you guys.
Yeah. What are you struggling with? What's going on in your little edge of the world that we can give our wisdom on? After all, that's what a sister's for. Bye, guys. I can look at myself. Hey, girl, hey. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in.
Okay.
Stop doing that. Welcome back to Sister Show Me How. I did not like that at all. Hello and welcome back. Okay. Let's try again. And well, God, okay, what is happening right now?
Take it.
That's what I'm saying.
Am I supposed to go?
No, I don't know. I feel like that's okay.
I'm sorry, I immediately go,
That's okay. At least we got an intro. We got the intro. You cry every time. We must be fucking hilarious, man.
Alright. Can I say the part about we've seen
You may absolutely say that part. I know you want to. Can we just do our intro over again? That way we have one that we feel confident about.
And ideally one that you don't have to clip a shit ton of little pieces together.
Yes, please. Let's make things easier for the editor, please.
Alright. Cute.
So that it's like,
that.
yeah.
A little montage.
Yes! We love a montage moment.
Yes, we do.
Montage moment, montage moment, montage moment. So today, oh my gosh, are you gonna work for me?
Did you break it?
I think I did. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's just being stupid.
Why did we do that? Because what are we starting with?
I don't know.
Where are we going?
She pressured me.
I was just ready to go. I was like, we're on this. We're not, but we're getting there.
You pressured me.
You weren't get set, go.
I just forgot exactly what I said to you. Again, another thing, anything that can churn. Oh my God. I cannot talk today.
English is hard.
Words are hard. Expressing is hard. Oh my God, there we go again.
Emotional boundaries with like. Cute. Better?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Cut it out. It out. I'm trying to do the little, what's his name from Full House. Cut it out.
I've seen one. I've never watched Full House, but there was one.
Never?
Yeah. There was one that I've seen where it was like, or maybe it was cut it out or something, but I think it was the scissors, but it was like cut. I don't remember what it was, but out was like thumbs back.
Thumbs back thing.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Whatever.
We need to catch up on our pop culture, clearly. And it's fine. Woo! We did it.
Honestly, I'm surprised it took us until the third recording for one of us to cry.
I know. I'm glad we both cried, though, and it wasn't just one of us. That would have been embarrassing.
I know. There's no shame in crying.
Absolutely.